The stakes are high. With the House of Representatives at a near split between Republicans and Democrats, every seat matters. Republican Scott Perry has won 6 terms in a row, but just as many Democrats believe this time will be different. But before they get a shot at victory in November, they have to win in the April primary. It's a Face the State special, Beyond the Podium, with the Democratic candidates for the 10th District. And here's your moderator, CBS 21's Joel D. Smith.
And that says it all, doesn't it? Thanks for being here today for this candidates forum. Let us meet the candidates right away in no particular order. We have Rick Copeland here. He is a U.S. Army veteran, graduate of West Point, and now an educator from Carlisle. We have Janelle Stelson, a longtime TV anchor in Central PA, who also worked at a number of stations in the area, including this one back in the day. And a self-described fourth-generation American, originally from Northeast PA, businessman John Broadhurst. Thank you so much for being here, everybody. I think our viewers are going to really get a lot out of this, our voters. A little bit of rules to go over for everybody so we know where we're standing here in this fast-moving forum. You'll have 35 seconds to respond to the question. If someone names you in their answer, you'll get another 15 seconds to respond. When your time is up, you will hear the bell.
Bingo.
And you will not be able to... Right, you got a little time after that, but that basically means you're done. You'll not be able to name the candidates who are not here. We'll have those same rules for them next week. And you'll have 45 seconds for a closing statement at the end. I think we're ready to go. Our first question, what in your background makes you the best candidate to win in November? We had a random draw to start things off, and so we're starting with Ms. Stelson.
Well, for the past more than 30 years, I have been living and working in this community, listening and advocating for the people of Central Pennsylvania and shining a bright light on our problems, our issues, holding the powerful accountable, including Scott Perry. And I plan to take that same listening to Congress. You know, I've been working and volunteering beside people for many, many years. And I'm getting the endorsements of an awful lot of labor unions as we work to make things better for the middle class, and also the new Dems, which reach across the aisle and try to accomplish things. What a novel concept. All right.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to go to Rick Copeland next. What do you say about this, your background?
Right, thanks very much. Number one, I want to highlight I'm the only person running that has actually won as a Democrat in a Republican district. I've done it twice. In 2021, I was the top vote getter. Obviously, to defeat Scott Perry in this district, we have to win a lot of Democratic votes, independent votes, and the reasonable Republicans that are out there. I've done that by building trust, by listening to folks. I've served for 9 years on the Carlisle School Board. I'm a retired military officer with combat experience, peacekeeping experience, a lot of experience in our district listening to people and actually taking action, building coalitions and taking action.
Gotcha. All right, John Broadhurst, what makes you the best person for this job?
Yeah, I think this election is really about accountability and progressive reform. We have seen, and I've studied, the rightward shift of the American political landscape now for 40 years, and I think this has had a devastating impact on working class people. So the reforms that I'm proposing are really to address the causes of MAGA and not the consequences. This election is not about Scott Perry, it's about us and the reforms that we aim to propose to build a better America for working class Americans.
Thank you very much. Hey, let's talk about the border right now. It's certainly been a major point of discussion by a lot of folks. Illegal crossings have doubled in the last couple of years. A lot of states are sending their National Guard troops to the border. And this is something that your opponent has certainly been speaking about as well, especially when it comes to what happened recently with some National Guard members there. Take a listen.
What are their rules of engagement? And mind you, ladies and gentlemen, the people that ran over them, that ran right over them, ran to Border Patrol.
This is what he's going to be talking about. So the border policy, are there changes that could come into play to improve things, to slow down things, but still be fair to migrants trying to come to our country as well? We'll start with Rick Copeland.
So thanks very much for highlighting the last part about fairness to the migrants, because I am the son of an immigrant mother from Mexico. So I want to highlight that I will not close the door behind me, but I believe obviously we need a secure border. You know what? There was a bill before the Senate. If it were passed, we'd be in much better shape in terms of all the additional Border Patrol folks. But we all know that the worst president in the history of the United States, Donald John Trump, quashed that effort. And absolutely, Scott Perry, as he just demonstrated, is not the friend of diversity in America. The strength of America is our diversity, and ensuring that all these good people, and they are good people.
John Broadhurst, when it comes to the border, it will be brought up in November for sure.
Yeah, I think Mr. Perry just demonstrated that he is a candidate of xenophobia, racism, and hate. Everyone recognizes that we have to have secure border, that our law enforcement officers at the border have to have resources, but we also have to address causes and not just consequences. One of the reasons why we have mass immigration today is because of failed foreign policy, American foreign policy, sanctions that do not work, and the vast majority of these people are seeking simply better fortunes in the United States. So we have to recognize also that we need immigration, but it has to be controlled.
Some ideas on the border when it comes to you. Janelle Stelson.
Well, I would just like to point out that while Scott Perry was at the border pointing fingers, he offered no solutions, and he flew there on the taxpayer dime. I think everybody's pretty well aware that the border is broken. The asylum system is broken right now. We need to fund it appropriately so that you can send people home more quickly who are deemed not to be the next wave of our best Americans. They need to go home in a humane and expeditious fashion. The people who are deemed to be the next wave of great Americans, we need to work to appropriately fund and get them amalgamated into our society in a better way. The more than 11 million dreamers who've been working here and paying their taxes, we need to make that permanent for them too. Enough with the just insecurity all the way around.
Okay, let's move on to this. The Biden administration is pushing for a ceasefire right now in Gaza. Senator Chuck Schumer is calling for a new election to replace Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. How involved should the U.S. be in the war in Gaza? We will start with John Broadhurst.
Yeah, I think the United States has to call for a ceasefire. I called for this 5 months ago. It didn't take me 5 months and 30,000 deaths to make up my mind. I think the United States has failed miserably on this issue, and I think that the Biden administration should call for an immediate ceasefire, but also should recognize that the peace process of Oslo has to be reignited, and we have to call for the creation of a Palestinian state. I'm afraid that the United States has really lost credibility on this issue today.
Janelle Stelson.
I'm pleased that we are now using aggressive diplomacy. I think Antony Blinken, our Secretary of State, is there right now. And I'm pleased that we're taking a leadership role on getting humanitarian aid to the Palestinians. I also stand firm. There was a ceasefire October 6th. Hamas was the one who, violated the ceasefire, and I stand with Israel's right to defend itself, and I stand with Israel's right to root out and decimate Hamas as well.
I'll come to you in just a moment. But, Mr. Rick Copeland, so how involved should the U.S. actually be? That's the question for this part.
So the U.S. should absolutely be involved. We must be a global leader, not only in the Middle East, but elsewhere, and that's a part of my policies. Please check out my policies on rickcopelandforcongress.com. They're very definitive. Absolutely, we need a ceasefire today, and I know they're still working on it, a humanitarian ceasefire. The hostages need to be released. The bodies need to be returned. But that's just the first step. I'm calling for a peace strategy, not a war strategy. And the United States is very adept at doing that. It is a challenging issue. I've stated before my displeasure with the current prime minister in Israel, and that clearly President Biden had the right idea when he said initially they must follow the rule of war and therefore not kill civilians indiscriminately.
I might need a clarification here. Go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to correct Janelle once again. There was no ceasefire agreement on October 6th with the outbreak of violence on October 7th. That's just not true. We had almost 300 deaths in the West Bank in the months leading up to the outbreak of violence on October 7th. So, and none of this really got press attention worldwide. The second point I want to make, and this is...
I'm not sure we get a second point on this. This is a different part of this, but I would like for you to respond to that. What did you mean by October 6th on the ceasefire?
I just meant we had peace. Israel was not under attack. Relative peace for the Middle East. Israel was not under attack, nor was Israel going after Hamas. Specifically at that point.
Okay, understood. Well, those are some topics internationally. We got to stick to some things that are happening here at home as well. Things are on the minds of voters. We want to get to that next. Thanks again for being here for Face the State Beyond the Podium. Stick around. All right, welcome back to this Face the State special with three of the Democratic candidates for the 10th Congressional District. Let's get back to it. Many of you have been seeing what's going on and interested about what's happening with DC. A lot of people say that it's broken, but here's the question. Can you work with others? What in your background actually shows that you can do that? So let's get a feel for that right now, getting to a positive outcome, and we'll start with Janelle Stelson.
Well, I've had to be nonpartisan for the past nearly 40 years on the news. You know, it was a good day for me if somebody who was ultra-conservative thought that I was far too liberal, and it was a good day if somebody who was more liberal thought I was, you know, in the very, very conservative pile. So I'm used to going down the middle. I will absolutely, you know, our problems are paramount. We haven't had somebody solving them for a long time. Scott Perry votes no on infrastructure for our roads and bridges, the good paying union jobs that those projects bring. You know, he votes no on healthcare that would bring down costs for most of us. All of these things, he votes against veterans inexplicably. So I will reach across the aisle and work with anyone to get our problems solved.
Rick Copeland, your background, what kind of lends you to maybe making this work better?
So let me start by saying you're absolutely right, Joel, that DC is broken. Congress is broken. Scott Perry is a big part of that problem. I will be part of the solution based on my background, which includes not only working in the military, working to provide peace and security in Bosnia for a better part of a year, but also working on the school board in Carlisle, working with Republicans, working with Democrats, listening carefully to everybody in the community. And I've done that not only with school board, but also with the Rotary Veterans Initiative that I run to help our veterans, and also with the Employment Skills Center Board, to build coalitions and partnerships that get things done to help people. Thank you.
John Broadhurst, part of your background that might lend to compromise in the future.
Well, first I want to just kind of dismiss the premise of the question, and that is bipartisanship itself. The reason why Americans are not clamoring for bipartisanship, they're asking for results. And in order to get results, you have to have two parties which actually have a certain respect for intellectual honesty. And we don't have that today. So what I'm calling for actually is strong Democratic majorities. The second reason why Americans are disillusioned is because we know that campaign finance contributions determines political outcomes. And so this is why I have stressed repeatedly and every opportunity for campaign finance reform. Until we do this, Americans will continue to be disillusioned and upset, and I think rightfully so.
The numbers show the economy is improving, but people aren't necessarily feeling that at home with what they buy every day. It's kind of the Snickers problem. So the most recent study shows that Medicare and Social Security, that'll be insolvent within the next 10 years. Here's the big question. What would you prioritize when it comes to government spending? Rick Copeland, we're starting with you.
So I want to highlight first and foremost, we have to make Medicare and Social Security bulletproof. Number one, we get rid of Scott Perry and it'll be in better shape. We make sure Donald Trump's not elected, it'll be in better shape. And that goes for every single issue that we could possibly be talking about. But without question, we have to ensure that Medicare and Social Security remain available. I also want to highlight, and we've thought about this question otherwise, you have to ensure, we have to ensure that the money that the government spends is well spent, and I'm thinking primarily about infrastructure and public education, because those are things that help us and provide actually a return on investment that is tremendous.
Gotcha. John Broadhurst,
Thank
same
you.
question.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Sure, it's the priority of spending and then also the looming issue of Social Security.
Well, again, I don't think there is a looming issue with respect to Social Security.
Well, it said it'll be, I mean, all accounts, it'll be insolvent within the next 10 years if nothing changes.
Yeah, and we know what we could do to make it solvent for generations to come, and that is what I proposed, lifting the cap on Social Security. I want to stress why. The American retirement system in the post-war era was like a stool with three legs. Those legs were personal savings, pensions, and Social Security. Very few Americans have personal savings sufficient for retirement. Very few Americans think or believe they will have a pension. And so Social Security is the only remaining leg, and we've got to save it.
Gotcha. Ms. Delson, same question, priorities when it comes to the government spending.
Well, I got to hammer Scott Perry again. He's voted repeatedly to cut Social Security or to raise the age when you can get it. That is no bueno. Taxes, I think we can restructure and take care of any shortfalls that may be projected in the future when you have the top 55 corporations in the country not paying their fair share in taxes, in some cases no taxes. You know, we can use some of that money and bolster the middle class, which the tax structure is no friend to at this point. Child tax care credits, we need to look at that. I have friends who don't work because they can't afford to keep their children in child care right now, something you may know something about as well.
Maybe so. Let's get to this now. These are specific questions just for one candidate at a time. We're going to start with Mr. Copeland. You ran back in 2020. You did not win that nomination. What's different this time that think you could win the nomination and beat Scott Perry?
So I'll highlight first and foremost, there's a lot of people throughout American history that have lost an election or two and then learned a heck of a lot from that. So I've learned a lot from that experience and I continue to apply that. I have a lot more time this time, and of course now we're almost to the election, but we've been working hard. We did listening sessions early on, all over this district, hearing what voters really think is important. Hopefully we'll get to some of that later. But also, I've had a chance to do a much better job than in 2020, which was kind of truncated, as you recall, of organizing and getting people involved and getting volunteers and knocking on even more doors.
Ms. Delson, the question for you. You currently don't live in the district. You said that if you win, you would move. Do you think it's important to live in an area you represent, and have you taken any steps to possibly do that?
It's absolutely important to live here. I've been living and working here since 1986. Is that enough for everybody? I had 4 different places. I lived in Harrisburg, one by the Capitol, one in Uptown. I lived in Susquehanna Township by the longest stone arch bridge in the world, by Fort Hunter. I lived in New Cumberland. I lived in Camp Hill. And more importantly, I've traveled all over this district, every nook and cranny, doing stories for 38 years. And also, the area knows me really well, and I think that's how we beat Scott Perry.
Mr. Broadhurst, your specific question. On your campaign website, it says that you were financially solvent in your 30s, and that a couple decades ago, I guess at this point. Here's the real question. How do you connect to people that aren't in the same financial situation as you, maybe living paycheck to paycheck?
I think that's pretty easy, actually, because I'm one of 11 children. My father was a truck salesman who grew up in the projects of Chester. I have one sibling who's worked at Acme for 30 years, another who's a union member, a Trump supporter, and works in a factory. I think in this election we have to remember, Democrats have to remember that we had in 2018 a person who presented himself as a military hero and he lost. In 2020 we had a very well-funded career politician with very good name recognition who lost again. The only way to win this election is to expand the electorate, and I think I'm the only one doing this right now.
It's now time for our closing statements. You'll each have 45 seconds. We're going to start with Mr. John Broadhurst. Take that sip. I'm sorry to surprise you there. You're first this time.
Yeah, so as I said, I think my campaign is really addressing in a frontal, open and honest way the major issues that impact working class Americans today. And I'm proposing pretty bold solutions for it. Reform of Social Security by lifting the cap, the complete elimination of medical debt, ending 20 years of forever war, which have had a disastrous effect on millions of Americans and lead directly to Donald Trump. So this is the reason why we're building a coalition of black and brown, poor people, well-to-do progressives. But I'm going to emphasize progressive reform because progressive ideals and progressive reforms are what built modern America.
Thank you. Closing statement from Janelle Stelson.
In 1986, my career began across the street, a couple yards away here at WHTM. Also worked here at WHP. But in the time I've been here, I have been shining a bright light on our issues and our concerns, and also holding the powerful accountable, including Scott Perry. And I loved my job. It was very fulfilling. But Scott Perry is bad enough. I mean, when I had to sit live on the set when Roe v. Wade was overturned, when the Supreme Court handed down the Dobbs decision, and look out in the camera and tell every woman watching that her rights had been rolled back 50 years, and then watch what he did. You know, he's an anarchist. He's an election denier. He's one of the architects of January 6th. I was on the set for all of these things, and I cannot let them stand. I hope the people of Central Pennsylvania will stand with me, because I will make sure your voices and your concerns are heard in the halls of Congress, and we're going to do something about them.
Thank you. Mr. Rick Copeland.
So thank you very much for this opportunity. With help from the voters, I will ensure we defeat Scott Perry decisively and serve everyone in this district in Congress. You know, I have the experience, the expertise, and the empathy to actually do that, to serve everyone, to listen to everyone, to help strengthen our democracy so that we actually get things done to help everyone. You know, when Scott Perry is not committing treason or voting against our interests, he's thinking of the dream candidate he'd love to run against. He's thinking of the people that maybe don't live in our district. He's thinking of someone who's never voted in a Democratic primary and has no established Democratic base. He's thinking of someone who also has never won an election as a Democrat in a Republican district, which I have done. He's thinking of someone that's never served in uniform. I have none of those liabilities. Thanks, and I welcome your vote.
All right, folks, thank you for being here on our show, our special Beyond the Podium. 3 more candidates coming your way on Face the State Beyond the Podium. In no particular order, we have Shemaine Daniels right here. She is a Harrisburg City Council member and an immigration attorney. She was the nominee in the district 2 years ago for the Democrats. We have Blake Lynch, who has worked with the Harrisburg Police as a community relations director and as a senior executive at WITF-TV. And Mike O'Brien, a Top Gun fighter pilot, a master's degree in mechanical engineering from MIT. Great candidates, great to see you here. Let's get going with the rules, okay? It's going to be a fast-moving forum. You will have 35 seconds to respond to the question. If someone does name you in their answer, you will get another 15 seconds to respond to that. When your time is up, you will hear this. You'll be permitted to finish your thought, but that's about it. And remember, you cannot name any other candidates who are not here. We had the same rules for them when we had them on our show last week, and they obeyed the rules, so I think you will as well. As for the last statement, you will have a closing statement that's 45 seconds long. Let's get started. So we've all heard from the Democratic candidates, all being very critical of Scott Perry, probably why you were running as well. But we want to hear about this as well. Scott Perry has won 6 elections in a row. Why do you think he keeps winning? We had a random draw to start things off here. We'll start with you, Mike O'Brien.
Well, honestly, I think he hasn't faced a candidate that is going to hold him to task, that's going to defeat him. And you have to have the resume, the resources, and to have built the coalition to do that. And I think with my background as a 20-year Marine, as a fighter pilot, my wife is also still active duty, we upheld our oath. And we can hold him to account, and I will hold him to account for the betrayal of his oath of office. And all of his self-stated advantages of freedom, patriotism, national service, leadership, next to me, those will turn into disadvantages. And that's going to give us a leg up in this competition this time around. And I do believe that we'll be able to defeat him this time.
Blake Lynch, when you're thinking about maybe his voters, maybe that's part of the reason. What do you think? Why does he keep winning?
He keeps winning because he is energizing his voters, and what we haven't had is a candidate that's been able to bring so many people together throughout the district. We talk about bringing new people in under the tent, but it's really important to make sure that we're galvanizing and energizing our base already. Here in Dauphin County, we already outnumber the amount of Republicans that are registered currently, and we're building those coalitions throughout. So we have to make sure that we are speaking to the youth vote. We're talking to diverse communities and also energizing the vote for our base, because that is how we're going to defeat Scott Perry, bringing people together as I've always done and tested to do as well.
Shemaine Daniels, you were a little closer than some others who ran against him before, but he keeps on winning. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, absolutely. In 2022, nobody expected me to perform as well as I did, and I did outperform all previous candidates with very little money. And I think the key is engaging our voters, engaging our base, and making sure that we turn out more voters. And with more resources this time, we will be able to do that.
All right, next question. There was an attack on the Capitol January 6th, 2021, but democracy held. A new president was able to begin the term on time. When Democrats say this election cycle this time, democracy is at stake, what specifically are you talking about? We'll start with Blake Lynch this time.
I'm talking about exactly why we are running is because Scott Perry did not uphold his oath of office. I was with the Harrisburg Bureau of Police on January 6th, watching the Capitol be overrun by those hoodlums and those rioters who were going after, trying to take away our votes, trying to disrupt the process. And, it is with that has given us the passion, our supporters, the energy to ensure, because we've already been there. My family, my friends, we are service members. Many of them have been service members. I myself had not served, but many who are continuing to serve throughout our communities. And we know that this cannot be a thing that is normalized here throughout Central PA or our country.
Ms. Daniels, democracy at stake.
Yes, absolutely. And we have to think about this in a global context. After January 6th, we had the world's dictators making fun of us. And after that, we've seen tremendous global instability because strongmen across the world have seen how weakened we've become. So it's our job in 2024 to make sure that we convey clear message that democracy stands strong in the U.S. and because of that, we'll be able to stand strong with our partners.
Okay, same question for you. I think it's one of the reasons you ran. Mike O'Brien.
Yeah, I'll tell you to start with, Donald Trump has pledged to be a dictator on day one. He pledged a bloodbath if he is not elected. And you know who his right-hand man is? His water boy, honestly, is Scott Perry. And for me, January 6th, that was a moment in my life. Again, that was a motivator for me to run. My wife and I, we were stationed at the Pentagon in the aftermath of the 2020 election. And we heard the rumors that Donald Trump was going to overturn the results using military force itself. And so that morning, my daughter's school was closed down. My son had to get picked up early from childcare. And after all that death and destruction, Scott Perry still tried to take away your vote.
Our next question, we're going to get into the economy right now. So unemployment remains low. The GDP is growing, 2.5%. That is what they're looking for, the economists. But grocery store prices, they are stuck at the higher levels that we saw when inflation got really going after the pandemic, and it really hasn't come down. They seem to be one of those sticky price points that don't change. But what do you tell the voters then who see all this stuff, but maybe they're living paycheck to paycheck and they don't feel the economy is improving? Ms. Daniels.
Yeah, I mean, we have a tremendous income inequality, so a lot of those aggregate numbers don't really speak to the lived experiences of our residents. So we need to take leadership in Congress. We need to alleviate some of the suffering people are experiencing. We need to raise minimum wage. We need to make sure that we go after corporations who are engaging in corporate gouging. We need to engage in enforce our consumer protection rules, et cetera, et cetera. So the feeling is real because people are experiencing hardship. Our district is struggling a lot. It's been economically disadvantaged for a long time, and I think it's time we have a representative who's interested in solving the problems for the district.
Mike O'Brien, what do you tell the voters when they might be hearing certain numbers but then feeling others?
Yeah, no, I agree with you that there are way too many residents of South Central Pennsylvania that have to live paycheck to paycheck, and you have to have a representative who can do something about it. I believe that I can do that in Congress, and I have a 4-point plan. I'll say the first thing we got to do is raise the minimum wage, make that a living wage. The second thing, staunch support of America's workers in terms of unions. We got to return power back to the middle class. Anti-monopoly, antitrust legislation, and then last but not least are changes to the tax code. So the enhanced child tax credit that lifted 4 million children out of poverty. We've got to continue that and also make the child care tax credit refundable as well.
All right, feeling the pain of what's happening in the economy. When you see the big picture, maybe it's not so bad. What do you tell folks about this?
It is bad. It is bad. My neighbors are saying it. My friends are feeling it. We have 2 children that are, we're raising a 9 and a 5-year-old. We're feeling it. When it comes to childcare, my family, we pay $1,300 a month for childcare for just 1 child. And then it's worse, of course, during the summer. So then we also talk about that just today, the report came out saying that PCE, is up 3.5%. And that is not sustainable for Central PA. When per capita, $40,000 is the salary and income of most average Central Pennsylvanians, you have to have someone who's local, who understands it, who feels the pain every single day, as my wife and I do.
All right. Hey, we're off to a good start here. I appreciate it, and hopefully the voters do as well. Folks, when we come back, we're getting to some more issues here that I know you're thinking about. We're actually looking abroad as well, because when you're a Congress member, you got to think about the entire world. Thanks for being here, and come back for more Face the State Beyond the Podium. All right, welcome back, everybody. This is the Face the State special. 3 of the Democratic candidates for the 10th Congressional District. We heard the other 3 last week, so let's get right back to it. Less than 1 in 5 Democrats right now supports what's going on with Israel and how they're handling the situation in Gaza. According to new poll numbers, this is it. It's down 50% to what it was in November. Only 18% right now are actually approving of what happened. So what is your level of support right now where things stand? We're going to start with you, Mike O'Brien.
Yeah, and I'm Jewish, so obviously the events of October 7th I took very personally. I will say I'm incredibly concerned about the humanitarian crisis that is ongoing right now in Gaza. We have to get more aid there. I do support President Biden's efforts in doing so. I know he's building a port. I know we've done airdrops, but we have to open up the roads. That's the only way we're going to be able to get 500 truckloads per day. I also think the priority is the return of the hostages. So on the table right now is a ceasefire in return for the hostages that are still in Gaza. I think we absolutely need to make that happen right now.
So for Democrats, it is certainly waning. Like we said, from November to now, it's down 50%. Where are you right now?
Where I was since January, to be quite honest. At our very first candidates forum, myself and one other candidate were the only ones that called for a ceasefire at that time. You only needed a few days to see that it was very unfortunate, the humanitarian crisis that was taking place, and I've been a staunch supporter of ensuring that our humanitarian crisis was ramped up and that the White House should have been doing more at that time. We continue to help other partners around the globe. We should have been there right now pressing our partners to do more, because what we see now is a travesty.
Shemaine Daniel, same question.
Yeah, I've supported a ceasefire from the very beginning as well. It's just some people don't understand the nuance. I support a ceasefire in the region. I also do think that for us to be a good partner to Israel is to make sure that Israel is complying with its Geneva Convention obligations. And I don't want Israel to fall in the same trap we fell after September 11, where we pursued a traditional warfare when what we needed to do was terrorism, counterterrorism work.
I got a quick follow-up question for all of you. It's really an either or. You can say both if you really want to. Are you more when you're elected, are you there to bring forth your ideas and what you stand for, like you just said, or are you there to push forth what most of your voters in your district actually believe? Just choose one if you can. I don't want a whole response on this. We'll start with you. Which one is it?
I think it's a mix of both. I've been an attorney for almost 20 years now, and I've also been an elected official for a long time, so I've seen a lot of issues. I bring a lot of skills, so there are things that will be particular to me that will be strengths, and I bring that to the table. But also when constituents bring issues to me and concerns, I work diligently to identify them and try to solve them as well. So it's a mix of, of balancing your expertise as well as the needs of the district.
What do you think?
It is absolutely a mix of both. I mean, we're running for the position to become a representative. So it's to be an advocate and a supporter of those. I have a lot of those who are in the Jewish faith who are supporters, financial supporters, advocates in the community. And we've continued to have these ongoing conversations. So this is reflective of many of them now seeing that Benjamin Netanyahu has really lost it.
Well, you said you feel strongly about this, but if everybody in your community, the people that voted for you, feel differently, how would you weigh that out?
I believe that we're here to represent the voters ultimately. And for me, I'll be honest, the issues that are ones and zeros for me, it's democracy and women's reproductive rights. So those are my ones and zeros. Outside of that, there is nuance and there's conversation that has to take place. And I do believe I'm here to represent the voters.
Appreciate it. Our next topic is climate change. If people won't see the positive results of what they're doing for years to come, how do you convince them to make the changes in their own life now, where it might be more difficult than they're living now or more costly? We're going to start with you, Blake Lynch.
It is really difficult because the federal government has to do more to help uplift those into becoming more not only economically advantageous with going forward, but also making sure that we're doing our part for the economy. So it's very expensive to outfit a house in geothermal. It's very expensive to buy a new car that is an eco car or model. So we should be doing more, not on tax credits, but providing upfront grants or programs that people can enroll into.
Ms. Daniel, same question.
I think we've fallen way behind, and we're at the time where everyone, regardless of where you are in the U.S., you're seeing the impacts of global warming and climate change. Right now, we're in the middle of cherry blossom season, and the cherry blossoms will no longer be there because the tide in D.C. has risen so high that it's it's overflowing the cherry blossoms. Here in central Pennsylvania, the gardeners are constantly having conversations about their produce, and the vegetables farmers are having to navigate all of those issues. We don't have to convince voters that climate change is happening. What we need to do is elect leaders who recognize that it's happening and help identify solutions for it.
Okay, same question for you.
Yeah, everybody needs to do their part, both individually and collectively, and as leaders in Congress. And I believe us, within the Democratic circle, we all agree. We know that we need to take climate action right here, right now. To get the independents and moderate Republicans on board, though, we have to start talking about this and looking at it in terms of jobs. So all the work that I've done in the district, talking to unions, it's very clear where the jobs come from. So when you're talking wind and solar, the electrical workers, that's obviously great for them. On the other side, when you talk nuclear, that's something that I very much want to continue to put funding towards in terms of small modular reactors, because that will create good family-sustaining jobs.
All right, now we have one more question for each of you specific to your campaign. We're going to start with Ms. Daniels. So you ran last time against Scott Perry. Like, as you said, you've been the most competitive in a midterm so far with that, but you still lost by more than 20,000 votes. How do you expect to make up that difference this time?
I mean, there's somewhat more resources. Because of my performance in 2022, the DCCC has targeted this race, so those resources will come after the primary. And we know that I only raised $400,000. I outperformed candidates who raised $2.5 million, $5 million. So we know the message was strong. We know it was just a matter of having the resources to engage just 25,000 more people.
Okay, and the next one is from Mike O'Brien. So you're fresh out of the military. One of your first votes, if elected, might be billions of dollars going to places like Israel or Ukraine. Some argue our problems at home are more important. That's where the money should go. What would you say to a voter who thinks that way?
Well, I'm glad that you brought up Ukraine right there. And this is a great example where I believe that economics are downstream of geopolitical competition. So obviously Ukraine is about freedom. It's about sovereignty. It's about respecting international borders. But what it's also about, it's about our kitchen table. So when you look at the price of food, the price of fuel, you know who controls that market? It's Vladimir Putin. You know who's on the side of Vladimir Putin? Donald Trump and Scott Perry. Instead, I'm on your side.
Thank you. One more question here. This is for Mr. Lynch. So you're the youngest candidate in the field. You've said that you can bring younger voters out to the polls. Yet statistics show us over and over again, older voters are the ones that vote most consistently and in big numbers. So you're 35. How can you appeal to people over 50, over 60, and make sure you're attracting that vote?
Absolutely. I'm 36 now,
Oh,
so
there
it's
you go.
okay.
Happy birthday.
Thank you. 36. But it's really because of my experience. I've been in the workforce and careers for over 20 years, so 2 decades. Prior to this, I was a senior executive and senior vice president of WITF Public Media, a $21 million organization in the region, helping to oversee 300 plus employees. So the executive experience that I bring, the relationships I bring, the only member of a union that's in this congressional race right now, I have participated and actually been a part of and paid union dues towards. So we talk about older supporters, they're a bulk of my financial supporters because a lot of our next generation cannot afford to provide a $100 donation.
Got it. All right, we're up. Now time for our closing statements. This was quick, right? Well, we're going to get to this. Everybody will have 45 seconds. We're going to start reverse order for how we began. So Shemaine Daniels, you go first.
Well, thank you so much for the time today. I would like to ask you to consider voting for me this primary. My name is Shemaine Daniels. I've been a councilman for the last 10 years in the city of Harrisburg, where I have a strong record, and you can measure my word against my votes. I also have been an attorney for almost 20 years now, and where I've advocated for women's rights and workers' rights. I ask you to vote for me because we need someone with integrity in office, and that I am the candidate. I'm the only one up here where you can go back and see my position on every issue, how I voted on every issue, how I've acted on every issue, and you know that the candidate that you vote for, when you vote for me, is the candidate you will have that shows up to be your representative.
Thank you very much. Blake Lynch.
You know, it is really important for us to understand that we have tried many things before. You know, a military veteran, someone with big name ID, and those who are currently politicians right now who are not successful. It is time for us to try something new. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. We need to be bold with moving forward, and that is with our campaign. It is about bringing people together from Dover to Dillsburg, from Halifax to Harrisburg, and having the local relationships already established, providing not only grassroots support, but financial support throughout the district. All of my donors, 80% of my donors, are based here in the district, unlike others who are outside of the district where those numbers are reversed. You want someone who has their children in our schools, who pays taxes here and understands our issues, and I would welcome you to go to blakelynch.com to learn more.
Thank you very much. Mike O'Brien.
Yeah, make no mistake that this primary is all about who can beat Scott Perry. You have to have the resume, the resources, and to have built the coalition to do so. I mentioned it earlier, but my resume is going to allow me to, from a position of credibility, hold Scott Perry accountable for the betrayal of his oath of office. We have also the resources to do this. We're leading in fundraising, and we've built the coalition. That coalition includes both Democratic Dauphin County Commissioners, George Hartwick and Justin Douglas. Down there in York, it's got George Scott, Lisa Kennedy. We have the mayor of Carlisle, Sean Schultz. That's what it's going to take to beat Scott Perry this time around. And for 20 years, As a servant leader, I fought for my Marines, fought for their families, fought for America, and now I'm going to fight for you, the people of Dauphin, York, and Cumberland counties.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all of our candidates here. I'm sure our voters have a lot to think about, and we appreciate it. Thank you for watching. So please hit the subscribe button and get the latest news by downloading the CBS 21 News app.